We're recording. Alive and well. All right. So, although it may seem early because we've just finished Pesach, we are going to go ahead and start studying Sukkah. Why? Because if you're going to make any designs for your Sukkah for your house, you need a little bit of a head start. So we're going to go through it. It's a very practical and also very spiritual section of the Mishnah, and we're going to, I hope, get a lot out of this. One thing I want to point out is we're going to keep using the word amma, which often gets translated as cubit, and that's roughly in modern American measurements about 18 inches. The great thing about using the 18 inches measurement is all you have to do is times the number that you see by 1.5, and you get a rough approximation in feet. So if something is 10 cubits, it's about 15 feet, give or take a few inches. Make sense? Yes. Okay. If you're right up at the edge of the cubits when we're dealing with something, then you probably have a different issue. But as we're going to see, it shouldn't be too much of an issue for a standard sukkah for the things we're talking about. But just keep thinking 1.5. It works really well in feet. This is one of the places where imperial is better than metric. All right. So chapter 1, Mishnah 1, volunteer.
A sukkah which is more than 20 cubits high is not valid.
All right. So if you build a sukkah and the sukkah is more than 30 feet high, right, that's to the roof. Right? So you've got your basic sukkah and it goes up 30 feet until you get to the roof. And that is not a sukkah anymore. We're going to do all of this and then we'll talk about why this would be. Go ahead.
Rabbi Judah validates.
Because in temporary, if you have too big, it becomes to be permanent.
That's one of the main considerations. That a sukkah is meant to be temporary-ish. We're actually going to see that there are ways to build a permanent sukkah in some ways, but if you are building it of certain heights, then A, it's not temporary, but B, you're also no longer sitting under the schach. You're no longer under the roof, right? Because I get to do my geometry, right? He says to the math teacher.
He's so smart.
Right, if you have your sukkah and it's 30 feet high, and this is me, Joe Jew, sitting at the floor, and the sun is up here.
Oh, you can barely see.
Where's my shade coming from? Right, where am I getting my shade? My shade is coming from the wall of the sukkah, right? The further up the sukkah you go, the higher the sukkah you build, the narrower the window of sun that's causing shade to come through the roof. For you. So with a sukkah like this, it's like only going to be at 12 o'clock noon that you're actually under the roof. Otherwise, the benefit that you're getting is going to be coming through the walls, which, as we're going to see, if you're not getting benefit from the roof, it's not a kosher sukkah. The schach, the roof, is the important element of the sukkah. And say it with me, schach. It's not an easy word to say for many people. That's the technical term for the roof. Okay, so 30 feet high and sukkah's too tall. Onward.
One which is not 10 handbreadths high, or which does not have 3 walls, or which has more sun than shade is not valid. All
right, so this is the opposite end to start off. 10 handbreadths is about 30 inches.
Oh.
So if you build a sukkah that's only that tall, it's not sufficient. Now, you might be thinking, who's going to build a sukkah this tall? Anyone here ever go camping? Right? And you don't have a tent, it's not all modern super duper camping, but all you've got are the branches around you. And what do? You build a little something low on the ground to protect yourself during the night, or even for shade during the day. You don't build a sukkah like we think of a sukkah when you're just out camping. And yet that was the kind of thing that most people back then would have known about. Right? You just build you just stack up some branches off a log or something, and then you crawl underneath it and you take a nap there out of the sun. No, not if it's under 30 inches or so, then your sukkah is not really a sukkah.
I want copy if you create one for your kids that they are much shorter, so for them will it be the same proportion that for an
average? This is an absolute value, not a relative value. So it just like if somebody was an NBA basketball player, their sukkah doesn't get to be taller.
Yeah.
Over the 30-foot mark. I mean, if the sukkah wants to be 10 foot tall, sure. And I would recommend that if you were in the NBA and Jewish. So 30 inches to about 30 feet, that's our margin for a sukkah. Has to have, as we saw here, 3 walls. We're going to come back to what that means. And we're also going to have more sun than shade. This is, again, talking about the Sukkah, that if you were looking down onto the floor of the sukkah, if you only have like a couple branches, then when the sun comes down, there are going to be a few spots that have shade, and the rest is going to be sunlight. That is not a sukkah, right? That is a box with a few branches on it.
So the majority must be a shadow.
Majority. So if you have 50% shade, like that, but there's still plenty of sunlight coming through, but 50% of it is shaded, then it is a kosher sukkah. Good. Onward.
And old sukkah, Bet Shammai invalidates it, and Bet Halal validates it.
All right, so an old sukkah, what do you mean? Part A.
What is an old sukkah? Anyone which he made 30 days before the festival, but if he made it for the purpose of the festival, even at the beginning of the year, it is valid.
Okay, so this is where we get into a question of kavanah, right, of intention. If you build a sukkah, which literally just means booth, because you want shade, that's great, but that's not the sukkah that you need for the Chag, for the festival. And the argument here is if you just have this old sukkah lying around, you can't use that for the festival. On the other hand, if you built it even a year ago, so you build it in November so that it's good for the next year's Sukkot, then that is okay. As long as you built it for Sukkot rather than just for shade.
Okay. Or to use it for other purposes. Right?
You can use it for all sorts of other purposes, as long as your construction of it was for the mitzvah of Sukkot eventually.
Okay.
And in fact, this was very common in many places. And also why you can use parts of existing buildings to build your sukkah. You don't have to build it completely freestanding.
Or an elephant.
Or like an elephant as one of the walls. Yes, we'll see if we can go into that when we get there.
So we don't need to wait until after Yom Kippur to start doing this.
No. Now, if you wanted to follow Beit Shammai, he leans that way, but even he agrees as long as it's for the purpose of the holiday, you can build it early.
No, Hillel approved.
Hillel approves completely, but Beit Shammai said it shouldn't be old. Hillel says even an old sukkah is fine, but they both agree that as long as it was built for the purpose, that it's fine.
And to
Hillel, right? Hillel wins.
So why are we waiting every year for the after Yom Kippur and we don't start before and we are not?
Speak for yourself. I start a little early.
Really?
I don't actually finish my sukkah beforehand. I always put up the frame earlier, and I'll get the supplies that I'm going to need and things like that earlier. And then, yes, right after Yom Kippur is when I finally put it together. But I don't have a very complicated or big sukkah. But for somebody who had a much larger sukkah, absolutely, they are free to build it in advance.
So we can build everything and leave the schach to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
That's the easiest way to do it. But even if you put the schach on early, you would still be a kosher sukkah, as long as you were building it for the mitzvah of Sukkot.
We got to make sure that we do our sukkah this year right next to the hall, because that was way better than all the way over
The wind.
Oh,
That wasn't a
wind.
choice.
That
We built it
was-
next to the hall, and actually what we really need to do is we have to double check all the pipes, because a lot of them got bent last year.
Oh,
The power of that wind, right?
Yeah.
Mashiv
oh,
HaRuach
I understand
was
that.
bending those metal bars. And yeah, exactly right.
Oh,
So
wow.
we're going to have to do a stock taking before we build this year, because we may need some replacements.
Because we're making more space.
Well, yes, but the area outside the social hall is perfect, except it's a wind tunnel. And last year that wind came through really, really strong. Yeah, the whole sukkah moved. I mean, it was being pushed down the driveway.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a giant
Because
sail.
The year before, we celebrated it.
Yeah, and it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we always build it. Just last year, the wind had other ideas. All right, Mishnah 2.
One who makes his sukkah under a tree, it is as if he made it within the house.
Okay, so we're learning two very important things from this. One, you can't build your sukkah in your house. All right, so if
It has to
this
be outside.
is my house and I want to build my sukkah, doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? What's your roof?
Yeah.
Right, my roof is not the skach, my roof is the roof of my house.
And you're not getting the natural light.
Well, this is not doing the protection. This is doing the protection. It has to be the skach that's doing the job. On the other hand, if I have, pardon my artwork, a tree like this, maybe that tree's going to fall over. Give it a better trunk. This is also not kosher because the tree is acting as the roof, right? It's my skach, and that's not kosher. Let me give you one more way to apply this, which is very relevant here in Florida, and I've had to disappoint a number of people for this. Outside on your patio, you have your lanai, that netting screen area over the back patio.
Be outside of it.
Not a kosher sukkah, right? Which would be lovely if it worked because it would keep the bugs away,
Oh, yeah.
but it doesn't. You can, by the way, wrap your walls in bug netting if you want to do that to keep them. Oh yeah, the walls, absolutely. You can build the walls out of concrete. But the skach, the ceiling, still is, we're going to see, has to not have that kind of material. We will talk about what the material is. Part 2.
One who makes a sukkah on top of another sukkah, the upper one is valid, but the lower one is invalid.
Right, so you build one sukkah, and then you add another sukkah on top. This one is okay. That one is not.
Because the roof that protect is the upper one.
Right. Now, you might have thought the reason why this Mishnah has to be taught, because why teach this? Isn't this like under a tree? You might have thought since eventually you're still benefiting from a skach, that this one would also be okay. But nope, not good enough. You've got to be directly benefiting from the skach, not a layer removed.
So the what do you call that? The ambulant, the sukkahs that they take from one city to the next, like in New York,
right,
they
right.
are actually kosher then.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to get to that as well in more detail. But if you build your sukkah, as some people do, on the back of a truck,
Yeah.
right? You build your sukkah there, and you drive that sukkah around. That sukkah is a kosher sukkah.
I'm surprised that I haven't seen an Kabbat doing that. So in order to help
Here
to
they
the
don't, but in
people,
New York they do.
the Sukkah mitzvah.
Welcome to a suburban community, right? I mean, you can do that in New York or you can do that in Baltimore because you have a dense population. So you pull up in front of an apartment building. Nobody in the apartment building has a room to build a sukkah. They can come out. They can use the sukkah. It's great. You drive down the street here, and how many Jews are you going to run into? And also, you have to, maybe if you drive down this street, you're going to find 100 families. Even if all of them were Jewish, 100 families is nothing compared to an apartment building where you have 500 families. So it's population density. This is a hard model to work when you live in a suburban city. And Orlando is suburban. All right, about part A.
Rabbi Judah says if there is no occupants in the upper one, the lower one is valid.
Right. The halakha doesn't go according to him, but he makes a point of trying to say, well, what if there's nobody up there? Then it's not really a residence and you're not under someone else's floor. Nope, still doesn't work.
Mishnah 3.
Yep, Mishnah 3.
If he spread a sheet over it because of the sun or beneath it because of falling leaves, or if he spread a sheet over the frame of the four-post bed, the sukkah is invalid. But he may spread it over the frame of a two-post bed.
Okay, so I'm going to be doing a lot of art tonight, I can tell.
This is cool.
All right, so the first situation, you got your actual sukkah, and it's a fine sukkah, but it's a little thin on top, and the sun is really hot. So I'll just throw a sheet over the top of my sukkah.
I don't see that being kosher.
And doesn't work. On the other hand, maybe all these leaves are falling in my soup, right? It's really annoying. I'll just stretch a sheet underneath, and that way the leaves will get caught and they won't bother me so much. And
No, because you are building another roof.
exactly right. Okay, but I've got my bed out in the sukkah, and I'm going to put a sheet over the top of my bed, my 4-poster bed, and because my roof is now the sheet from the bed. And here's where it gets interesting. But if I want to put a sheet like that, that's okay.
What if I want to put a mosquito net? You know, one of those.
Again, as long as it's sloping,
Slant.
it doesn't count as being the roof, and you're okay. So, which by the way is also going to come back later when we're building our sukkah. You're not allowed to build a sukkah with a roof like this.
It has to be straight.
Ish. They're
But if you build like that, but the sun still is falling on you, so what's the problem?
We'll get there. It doesn't count as a roof is the general answer, right? A real roof for a sukkah has to be flat or flat-ish. You don't have to get out your level and make sure it's perfect. But okay, we'll get to the roof in more detail. Mishnah 4.
If you train the vine or a board,
Yep.
or ivy over the sukkah and put shach on it,
Right.
on top of it, it is not valid. Continue.
Go ahead and do A. Yeah.
But if the shach is more than them, or if he cut them, it is valid.
Okay. So let me give you a diagram of what they're talking about, and then we'll get the general rule. So I've got my frame, and I built my frame, and it's out in my backyard, and it's there all year. And I plant ivy around it. So during the year, it grows up and over the frame, like a gazebo, right? In my backyard, a little arbor thing going on back there. Very nice. Good for the real estate value, right? So that is not a kosher sukkah, right? Because these things are not built for the mitzvah. Those are still growing from the ground. But if I have a schach as well, and there are a few vines growing here and there, but the schach is the majority of what's giving me benefit, then yes, that is kosher.
And what happens if I decide to create schach as an ivy leaves?
Well, that's the end of part A. If you cut them, if I go beep and cut them from the ground, now it's kosher.
Oh, interesting.
Because cannot be live.
It cannot still be living from the ground. General rule, part 2.
This is the general rule. Whatever is susceptible to ritual impurity and does not grow from the ground may not be used for shach. But whatever is not susceptible to ritual impurity and thus grow from the ground, soil, may be used for shach.
Okay, so there are 2 conditions for something that you can use for your roof. One of them is it has to have grown from the ground, right? That's why we don't use like an iron beam. Right? You don't have an iron beam tree anywhere. It's why you can't use glass or plastic or a sheet or things like that. And 2, it cannot. Let me make sure you're good. It cannot be susceptible to ritual impurity. Now, what happens is, in Jewish law, a natural product is not susceptible to ritual impurity until it has been worked to become a man-made object. So let's take it. Yeah. Yeah. So let me give you sort of an example, right? So the general rule is that a natural object is not vulnerable, not susceptible to ritual impurity, to tumah, until it becomes a man-made object. So imagine I have a tree. The tree by itself, dead body falls against the tree, move the dead body, the tree is not ritually impure, right? It is because it is still a natural object, it's fine. There's a tree, I take a saw, I cut off the branch falls to the ground, dead body falls on the branch is not susceptible to ritual impurity because it is still not a man-made object. I take that branch home, I shave it down and turn it into a baseball bat, and a body falls on the baseball bat, and now the baseball bat has become ritually impure because of the contact with the dead body. And there's a whole long set of arguments, which we're not going to duplicate here.
We saw that in Avodah Zarah.
Exactly, of where things change between natural and man-made, of that point in the construction process of where that happens.
Usually it's when you add something to the object.
It's not just adding it, it's also when it's in its usable form as opposed to its natural form. But that's debatable depending upon what type of object, what type of natural material, and things like that. So if something is still growing from the ground, then it's not from the ground. It has not been removed from the ground. And if something is unnatural, like glass or plastic or steel, and then it also is not from the ground ever originally and can't be used for your schach as well. Or if you have a wonderful collection of baseball bats, you cannot use them for your schach. You can't take your favorite baseball bats and lay them on the ceiling to make your schach for your sukkah, because those are man-made, naturals, man-made, no longer natural objects, and they are susceptible to ritual impurity. Now, most of the time, this is not a big issue because most people just cut stuff from the ground and throw it up on the roof, and then you're good. There are some wiggles that we'll have to deal with, which the Mishnah will take us through. But yeah, in general, you hack a branch off your tree, you take one of the big palm fronds off of a palm tree, and you lay it on the roof, you're good.
Bundles of straw, bundles of wood, and bundles of brushwood, they do not use them as schach. But all of them, if he untied them, are valid. And they are all valid for the walls.
Okay, so the Rishomi explains that the bundles, when you have these things tied together, even though these things are not yet worked and are not considered man-made, it still looks like you're not building a roof, but like you're putting them up there to store. Right? That you're just putting them up on the roof to dry out and store them, and that was what you did back in the old days when people had to handle their own raw materials. That's why if you untie it and now they fall out and they spread, now it's okay, because now it's clearly a roof, not a storage frame. But all of them, if you want to build the walls out of them, no problem. You want to pile up, wood that you've got, or pile up bundles of straw for your side. If you want to go down to the store and buy bales of hay and stack up the hay to be your sukkah, that is good. Make sense?
It's all about the schach.
It's all about the schach. Try and make a song out of that. It's all about the schach, about the schach, about the schach.
That was good, Rabbi.
Mishnah 6.
They may make schach out of wooden planks, the words of Rabbi Judah, and Rabbi Meir forbids. If one places on top the sukkah a plank 4 handbreadths wide, it is valid provided that he does not sleep under it. Okay, so here we have wooden planks, which are close to being man-made objects because you've had to take the log and cut it flat. And the question is, yeah, but I kind of need beams to hold things. Yeah.
How big can they be before we've got a problem? And so they debate in the Talmud of exactly the width, but we're looking at about 3 to 4 handbreadths. So you take 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands. That's about the width of a beam that if you go beyond that, you've got a problem.
Okay.
But if it's a narrower strip of wood, then that's still okay.
That's why I've seen more of them are narrower than that.
Exactly. If you can't just go down and get 1 by 12s and lay them across your roof. It'd be really solid and really shady, but doesn't work.
Even the ones that I've seen at the hotels, like in Israel, they're smaller.
Thin slats, and then the proper schach laid on top of it. And yes, if you did we do part 2?
No.
Yes. If one places on top of the sukkah a plank, it's valid provided he does not sleep under it. Didn't we read that part?
Yes.
Right. So that plank is now casting a shadow of doubt. So as long as when you're dwelling in the sukkah, you're not dwelling under that plank, that's okay. Make sense? Okay. Mishnah 7.
A wooden roof that has no plastering, Rabbi Judah says.
Okay, let's make sure we know what we're talking about here. This stuff. When you smear
Okay.
right? It's like liquid stone. Where'd my pen go? Okay, so usually when you're building a house in ancient Israel, you'd lay out your boards to make the basic structure, but you're not going to use boards all the way everywhere. You're going to take and smear plaster, to fill it in. It's what we call plaster and lath in English construction. And that would give you a solid roof. So the question is, if I've got the frame up there, but I haven't put the plaster on, is it kosher or not kosher?
No.
Right? So in our modern world, it's almost like saying, imagine someone has built the structure of your roof, but they haven't put the shingles on. So it's just the beams. Got the idea? Okay, so now we get the answer, well, the argument.
Rabbi Judah says that Bet Shammai says that should be loosen the planks and remove one from between each two.
Right, because these are almost solid going across. I mean, they're laid out, but they're almost solid. So he's saying, pull them up, like unnail them, and take out every so often so that there are some gaps. Right, that's Rabbi Beit Shammai's opinion.
And Bet Hallel say he should either loosen the planks or remove one from between two.
Right, so his argument is you can do one or the other. You don't have to do both. As long as the planks are not like really permanent, or as long as they're not totally complete, either condition is okay. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then
Rabbi Meir says he removes one from between two, but he does not loosen the planks.
Right. So Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that the loosening is not the important thing, but the gaps are the important thing. And that goes back to the idea of a roof that is slightly imperfect, as opposed to a roof that is just temporary. Make sense?
Yes.
And then how goes by
A Beit Hillel. Yeah.
One who roofs,
Mishnah 8, sorry.
okay. One who roofs his sukkah with iron spits or with bedposts, if the space between them equals them, it is valid.
Let's do that one first, because the part 2 is very different. All right, so this doesn't mean that that's your schach. This means that is your frame. Right, so you take the iron bars that you normally use for roasting things, and you lay them up, and then you lay your schach on top of it. If you do that, as long as the space between them is big enough compared to them, so there's at least as much gap as there is bar, then you're okay. But if there's more bar than there is gap, then that doesn't count, because now most of the sukkah is being covered by the iron, not by the actual schach. So that's why if you build a sukkah and you have like an iron bar going across it, that's okay as long as you have that. But if you have an iron bar going across it and another one going across like that, now we're getting into too much metal versus schach for causing the shade. Make sense? Yeah. Okay.
The simpler the better.
That is the easiest way to do this, yes. But not everybody had access to perfect resources. And so the sages want to, A, make sure they understand the halacha so that they can approve or disapprove of any sukkah that someone might make. And B, by having all these little details, it reminds us of what we're trying to sit under and why we're sitting under it, so that our sukkah has meaning to it, not just a construction project. All right, which part 2 is going to also tie into.
One who hollows out a haystack to make for himself a sukkah, it is not valid sukkah.
Okay, so this one I love, because it's called the Jewish igloo, right? You've got your stack of hay, and all they do is dig out a place to sit inside. It's beautiful, right? It's like such a good idea, right? Just take your pitchfork and pull out the hay from the middle, and the rest of it will stay.
That must be very high.
Yeah, you'd want this to be nice and thick.
Yeah.
And then you just sort of crawl inside or walk inside, and that's a sukkah. And doesn't work.
I guess they tried everything before.
Why?
So it doesn't work for the very important reason that in building a sukkah, the walls come before the roof. The schach has to be the last thing. In this, the schach is before the walls. Right? You're not creating a sukkah, you're creating a hole within which you can sit. And that opposite approach doesn't work. The schach always has to be the final thing. It's the schach that makes the sukkah. This always frustrates our men's club every year when we're building the sukkah, because it'd be much easier to put the schach on if the walls weren't up, because it's much easier to reach around and do things and tie it down and all of that. But then it wouldn't be a sukkah, right? Then it would be a hut, and that's not what we need. So yeah, the walls have to be set and then the schach put in place. Okay, we're making good time.
Yeah. Mishnah 9?
Mm-hmm.
If it hangs walls down from above to below, if they are higher than 3 handbreadths from the ground, it is valid.
Okay. This is a wall. Not all walls are created equal. Imagine my wall is made up, we'll just imagine, of planks, but my planks are short. They don't reach the ground. There's a gap. Is it a valid sukkah or not a valid sukkah?
I wouldn't think it was. Because
I think it is, because the most important is the schach.
What did the Mishnah say?
then you're fine.
It's invalid.
It is valid.
If you're more than 3 handbreadths, right, about a foot, if there's about a gap between the roof and the bottom of more than a foot,
So, but the walls, they have the legs of the wall. They are that a part of the wall is in the air,
right,
but on the sides they are touching the ground.
there's like, well, yes, because you can't make it hover.
No.
But the gap here detaches the main part of the sukkah from the earth. And that is not kosher. So, well, read the part 2, and then we're going to see what the option is if you only have limited length of wall.
If he raises them from the bottom to the top, if they are 10 handbreadths high, it is valid.
Okay, so on the other hand, if you, do this, my pen's backwards. And this is less than, and this is greater than, what should we say? We're 10 handbreadths for this, right?
10.
Right, our 10 handbreadths, which is about, as we said, 30 inches, then that's valid. Even though there's a big gap, perhaps between the wall and the schach, the walls are meant to come up from the earth. And that means they need to be connected.
Then I have a question for you, because this is interesting. There's a part in Puerto Rico, it's a town, that everybody lives in boats. They're right on the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were going to build a sukkah, they would have to build it on the boat.
You can do that.
You can do it.
Yes.
Okay.
But the same rule would apply as far as if they left a gap at the bottom.
Yeah, no, that if they're built from the top, they're built
Right.
from the bottom. Obviously, they'll do the shack. And,
Yep.
But they would have to have at least 3 walls.
So let me give you a very practical modern construction problem. So a lot of people, when we go to get building materials, you go down to Home Depot and you want to get a wall for your sukkah. What you're going to look at, you're going to probably see is a 4x8 sheet of plywood. That's perfect, except you have a problem. If you stand it on end so that it's tall enough, you've only got a 4-foot sukkah, right? It's like a telephone box. If you lay it down, you only have a 4-foot high sukkah, which doesn't work so well either. But with this in mind, 3 4x8 sheets of plywood will give you an 8-foot by 8-foot sukkah with only a 4-foot wall, but that's high enough. and then you just have wooden posts that come up along the corners, and you put your schach at the top of that, and you can make those as high as you want. You've got a lovely window for a refreshing breeze.
I feel bad because I took the other solution.
Mhm.
Buy two and put one over the other one.
That's fine.
No, but now it's too much work.
So,
Actually, this is
hold on.
much easier.
So next year, right?
Yeah.
You can double the size of your sukkah. You make them only this, and you take the one that was here and put it here, and now you've got a longer sukkah. You can invite more people.
No, because I need to buy more pipelines.
Oh, you mean for the vertical part?
Yeah, for the
Right.
structure. Yes.
Or you can put down a floor. Just put them on the ground so people don't have to worry about the bugs. It is good to know. And in fact, last year when we had our sukkah catastrophe, this was really important because what we ended up doing was opening up the wall at the top to let the air through,
That's right. I
so that it
remember
wouldn't
that.
keep blowing it over.
Yeah.
And that is why we were able to still have a sukkah despite the really nasty wind we had last year. Yeah, that was no fun trying to fix that. All right.
Yeah, the decorations were all over the floor.
Yeah. Oh, it was
Parking lot.
it was bad. It
I
was
feel
bad.
bad for the kids.
Yeah, I know. They worked hard and it looked great, and then the wind came and went. But that's part of the sukkah experience, is to be
Yeah.
vulnerable and to be out in the open and to know that you'll still survive. And
I feel that the winter arrived.
Sukkah nofelet, the sukkah fell, and we bring it up again, which is one of the metaphors for the rising of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
So.
Rabbi Josie says, just as from the bottom to the top 10 handbreadths suffices, so from the top to the bottom 10 handbreadths suffice. If he distances the shach 3 handbreadths from the walls, it is invalid.
Okay, so Rabbi Yossi is a minority opinion. He's basically saying, as long as you've got 10 handbreadths, tfachim, 30 inches, anywhere along the wall, that's good enough. And the other sages say no, it's got to be within 3 tfachim of the ground.
If you have like less than 3 hands elevation from the ground.
You mean? Oh, so you mean it's like
Yeah,
like
the
here.
The bottom part is already, yes.
It's not quite on the ground, but the gap is like it's like
less than 2
like 2 handbreadths.
2 handbreadths.
Kosher.
It's kosher.
It's kosher, right? So there's a principle in Jewish law known as lavud, which is if something is close enough, it counts as being connected. It's very important when building an eruv. It's also very important when building a sukkah. And that's actually where part 4 is very important.
How do you spell the concept?
Lavud. It's been a long time since I've had to write it out.
Lame?
Of course I think it's about Lamed Vav Daled, Lamed Bet Daled. I'd have to look it up. I'm sorry. My Hebrew spelling is a little better than my English spelling, but not much. So what's happening here at the top is they're saying if you build your schach and you've got your frame and your schach is in the middle, but there's a gap, right? You've got a gap here that is more than 3 handbreadths, tfachim, then that is not good. So you have to imagine.
How we would even stand on
Well, I mean, you have to imagine you have like beams that are holding it up, and the beams go all the way around,
Okay.
but your schach is just a patch in the middle
Okay.
of the sukkah. So if you look up, there's a gap here and a gap there, and schach in the middle, and that doesn't work. If it's more than 3 tefachim, more than 3 handbreadths, a little gap is fine, right? And it doesn't have to be a perfect connection all the way around. As long as the roof does reach the edges at some point, you're okay. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. 10. I think we're going to be able to finish tonight.
If the roof of a house is open and he plays shock over it, if there is a distance of 4 cubits from the wall to the covering, it is invalid.
Okay. So, boom. So much art. Wouldn't call it art. So many illustrations. So, back in the day, my lovely little house, my little house on the prairie, and I take my roof off. or maybe there's an opening in my roof. And then I put schach over the house. So it's my regular house, but my regular roof is missing. And so I've got schach instead. As long as the schach goes all the way to the walls, it's kosher.
Oh, wow.
In fact, I remember seeing in a museum that in Amsterdam, there were homes that had a roof that was made to split. And they had like pulleys, and you pull a rope and the roof would open up both ways. And then you would have your schach to live in. And in Israel today,
Like the sports stadium.
Cool.
like a sports stadium, exactly. And in Israel today, there are many homes, I don't know about many, but there are many like apartments that are on terraces that have a special part of the roof near the patio that slides back to give you an area that you can build your sukkah in.
But how long need to be the area? That need to be 100% of the roof open, or
It needs to be so that the schach comes within the 3 handbreadths of the wall. So if you have like one room in your house that has an opening to it, that's perfectly fine. The rest of the house is still a house. That room now becomes a sukkah.
doesn't matter if you have 4 walls?
As long as you have to have the minimum of 3, right? So if you only have like 2 walls because it's a corner part of the house, then no. But if you only have 2 parts, how are you living there when it's not Sukkot? You trying to think about remodeling?
No, about try to find an exception.
You're going to go home with a saw and cut a hole in the ceiling. You know, it'd make it a lot easier for moving things from the kitchen to the sukkah. I don't think Emily would mind, right?
Oh, no, no. And the girls.
Do it when she's away. Then surprise her when she gets back. Look what I did. All right. Part 2 is going to be similar.
Similarly, in the case of a courtyard which is surrounded by columns,
Right, which was a very classic way of designing a not a hacienda. That's later. What do they call those Roman villas? Right, that was the common way of designing a villa back in the days of the Mishnah. We still find ruins of them and archaeology, as well as many descriptions. So, with my best drawing, you had your main house like this, and in the middle of the house, there was a courtyard.
And the Spanish style.
yes.
That's why I said hacienda, kind of, you know, it was, and then, because this was the Roman style.
Yeah, we still have those.
And if you take this interior area, you know, and there's little columns,
Yeah,
and you put schach over that,
it's okay.
boom, it's a sukkah. Yep. You're fine. Really convenient.
I've seen that a lot in Morocco.
Yeah, absolutely. All around the Mediterranean, this is a very popular house design, because it gives you an outdoor area that's still protected. And then part
But
3,
in that case, you don't have 4 walls.
of course you do. The walls are all around you. The columns are sufficient.
The columns are
That's what we just learned in part 2. Part 3.
A large sukkah which was surrounded with material which is invalid for shach, if is there a space of 4 cubits beneath it, it is invalid.
Right. So what they're trying to say is that even if you build the sukkah out of a material that you couldn't use for the schach, as long as there is a space beneath it that is good enough to be a sukkah, then the sukkah is considered kosher. Right? It has to be 4 cubits big enough inside, but that's the only requirement. Make sense?
Wow, we almost made it.
The other way that also applies, let me, well, actually, hold on a second. My drawing was good. Another way to look at this is, rather than looking at this as being a villa, according to the 3rd part of that last Mishnah 10, is I've got my schach here, but I also built the rest of this hut out of plastic. Right, so I built a huge plastic area, like one of those party tents, right? So it's got a vinyl plastic roof over the top. but I cut a hole in the party tent, and then I put schach in the gap. Yes, that is considered a kosher sukkah.
How big?
That's what Mishnah 10 was talking about. As long as...
Because what happens if we use the tent, the beach tent?
As long as there is four amot, 6 feet.
6 feet, 6 feet inside.
Yeah, 6 feet inside is okay.
No, each side 6 feet.
Yes, yes.
So if I have the, the beach roof that they are, you know what I'm talking about. That it's not a tent. It's like a.
The little awning.
Yeah, whatever.
Like if you're like if this is my house and my person's here, it like comes down, and there's it's like made out of fabric, right?
It's
like that.
It's like a roof. I don't want to go there. Okay.
It's like a roof that comes down.
No, it's like a real roof.
Right.
With 4.
Like a patio.
Yeah, but for the beach.
Like you.
Oh, you're talking about like a beach tent?
It's not, but it's not really a tent. It's like only like completely open without walls.
Okay, but what's the roof made out of?
Plastic, right?
Plastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happens if I have this?
Well, there's no walls.
Well, but you see the columns are like walls.
Yeah, but the columns actually surround the area they enclose it, not like one at each corner.
Okay. Because I was thinking like if I have this and I make a hole in the middle of 6 feet by 6 feet, okay, so I have my sukkah.
Right. And if you wrapped plastic all around
it,
then you'd be fine. If you covered all the walls with a solid plastic,
exactly.
then yes, you would have a valid sukkah. It would look really weird. And
but it's very easy.
And only the part that has the schach, right?
Is the one where
this
you sit under.
Is where your actual sukkah is. If you sit under here, no.
Yeah.
If you sit under here, no. If you sit here, yes.
So 6 feet by 6 feet. 6 feet by 6 feet.
That's like 2 meters, 6 feet.
Yeah, I think so. That will take almost the whole roof, but that's fine.
Well, even better.
But it's much easier to build.
I'm still not 100% sure what you mean by this beach tent thing. You can show me afterwards.
Correct. Yeah.
Show me a picture on Amazon or something afterwards. All right, Mishnah 11. And then chapter 1's done.
One who makes his sukkah like a cone-shaped hut or leans it against a wall. And Rabbi Eliezer invalidates it since it has no roof. But the sages declare it valid.
Yes. So this is a case where you need to see the Bavli, right? Because I don't know if you remember earlier on when we were talking about the 4-poster bed, and if you had the flat, that was a problem. But if a 2-post bed and you had the sheet coming down, that was okay. So, and according to the Bavli, we have a picture.
Yeah. Something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that could be great because if I open in the middle hole and I put a plastic around.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Oh, great. I have an easy sukkah for next year. Great.
Next year is not long. Okay, so when you go into the Bavli actually analyzes these two opinions and realizes that this version of the Mishnah has to have been flipped. That Rabbi Eliezer has to be the one saying that a cone or a leaning sukkah is okay. And the Chachamim, the sages, are the ones who say it's not okay. And there's a very long discussion in the Talmud of how they come to that conclusion. But this is why even just reading the Mishnah by itself is not 100% foolproof, because you need the additional review of the tradition to ensure that the tradition has come through perfectly. So in the Talmud, they explain that the sages say that a cone-shaped sukkah or a leaning sukkah is not okay. Not okay. You can't have a teepee sukkah. No wigwam sukkah. Part 2.
A large reed mat, if made for lying upon it, it is susceptible to ritual uncleanliness and is invalid as shach.
Go ahead and read part A because it doesn't make sense without it.
If made for a shach, it may be used for shach, and it is not susceptible to uncleanness.
Okay, so this is where we get into a modern halachic debate and a big marketing competition. So you may have noticed that a lot of Sukkot have like a roll of like bamboo or strips of little reeds that you just unroll as your schach. Right. The question is that okay or is that not okay?
Hopefully it's okay because Mike has that.
So here's where the halacha is, and here's why people argue about it even still. The halacha is if you build that for a floor, if you've made that mat, right, you wove the mat, because usually back in the day, people made their own mats, and you made it as a floor mat for sitting on, then that is considered a man-made object, and you can't use it for your sukkah. So you can't take your floor mat and throw it up on the roof during Sukkot. However, if you take the same materials and you weave it in a way that looks really similar, but you're weaving it so it will be schach, then you can put it up on the top and it's okay.
So if I bought this with a kavanah, that would be for the schach, okay.
That's why people still argue.
Okay.
Because as you saw, if it was made for schach, then it's okay. Because it's about, were they transforming it into a man-made object, or were they just binding together natural objects?
I don't know why they were made.
Which is why there's a big market for kosher-approved, rabbi-supervised schachs that you can buy for your sukkah, which cost about 8 times more than what you would buy for the same mat if you just went to Home Depot.
So you say that bottom right, it's not so okay to use.
No, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many other rabbis, it is. Because assuming you got the kind of schach that I'm thinking of, which is like you go to Home Depot and they have it in the garden center, nobody sells those mats to be subtle. They are designed to be shade. That is their only purpose, is to block out the sun. They may not have thought that someone was going to put it flat, but they definitely did not think someone was going to be sitting on it. Nobody thought these were going to be rugs.
Or stepping.
Exactly. And in fact, if you step on them, they will break very, very quickly. So yes, I believe that they are valid because they were designed to be shade cloth or shade barriers. Even if they were imagined to be vertical, there's nothing wrong with putting them because they were definitely not going to be floors and they were definitely not going to be rugs, and they are designed not to be used in that way. They would fall apart. They haven't been turned into a rug. Our ancestors, they were really thinking about weaving things into mat rugs, not just tying together some thin bits of bamboo. So I think that the halacha is that for a modern thing that was designed to be a shade, that can still be used for a schach. If you go to one of those fancy stores where they have mats or rugs, or like in Japan they have tatami, which is the bamboo flooring, and that you definitely cannot use for your schach, because those were designed to be rugs. Those were designed to be floors. That has already transformed it into a man-made object. Now it is susceptible to ritual impurity, and you can't use it for the roof.
So if you don't know exactly what was originally was made, it's okay.
If you have a reasonable suspicion that it was made only for shade and not for flooring, then yes, you can use it. And if you're in the garden center of Home Depot, you're safe. If you go to a fancy import store where they're selling cultural things and some of them are wall hangings and some of them are rugs, that's a little iffy.
I feel bad I didn't study this before. I could really save so many discussions with my wife about the sukkah, that the pitch tent is perfect. It's cheap, easy to do, easy to storage. Oh my God, I could save years of discussion.
But your wife wanted a nicer sukkah.
No, she doesn't go. Doesn't want any.
Oh, sorry.
That's the point.
So the sukkah was too hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this would have made it
There's
easier
too much room in a garage
to store. Right.
But in this way, it's perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel so bad now.
No.
No,
Now you
what
know
I will
it.
do is I will throw whatever I have, so she will be happy that she won. But the tent that is already broke, I will cut the roof and make a sukkah, and they have the nylon already. That's it.
So here's what you do.
Everyone's happy.
You don't throw it away. You
I
let-
donate.
Exactly. You let people know that you are upgrading your sukkah.
No, adapting the sukkah to the different needs of the family.
You don't need to. That's fine. Yes. That, you know, as our family continues to change, we need a different sukkah. We have the old sukkah, which is still very good and kosher. But if you would like to have it, it's yours if you bring the truck.
And everyone is happy.
Exactly right. Shalom bayit. Shalom bayit. Basukkah. It's,
Perfect.
you know, the more you learn, the more shalom, the more peace. All right, let's keep going because we're going to finish this.
Rabbi Eliezer says, whether small or large, if it was made for reclining upon, it is susceptible to uncleanness and it is invalid as shah. If made for a covering, it is valid as a shah and is not susceptible to uncleanness.
All right, so Rabbi Eliezer's opinion is actually giving us a little more information about the sage's opinion. He's saying that there are small mats, which are what people sit on, and then there are big mats, which is what people sit under. And the sages said that's the difference. So you can't take a bunch of small mats and put them on your roof because everyone knows those are sitting mats. And you don't have to worry about a big mat if you put it on the roof because everyone knows that's going to be a shade mat. And Rabbi Eliezer says, no. Doesn't matter big, small. What you only have to worry about is what was it designed for. Was it designed as a sitting mat? Then you can't use it. Doesn't matter if it's 30 feet wide. It doesn't matter if it's only 6 inches. Was it designed for shade? Doesn't matter if it was small. Doesn't matter if it was big. You can use it. So that's a debate between the two of them. And that's it for...
And it sounds like that's the one that stood, right?
Yeah, I mean, more or less, yeah. So, and that's, again, you know, you wouldn't want to take sitting mats and put them up there no matter what. Good. That's the end of chapter 1.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi.
It looks like you still had another question at the time.
No, because I didn't hear the last part.